The kettlebell snatch is one of the foundational exercises in kettlebell training. Like the kettlebell clean, the snatch often gives people a lot of issues, particularly with slamming the kettlebell on the back of the forearms, which causes a lot of pain and discomfort. So in today's video, I'm gonna walk you through easy to follow steps to help you master your kettlebell snatch technique and get you out of pain. The first thing I want you guys to know about the kettlebell snatch is that it is predominantly a lower body focused exercise. We're certainly working the entire body. We certainly are going to be working some biceps, some traps to get that bell up and overhead as we go into our shrug and as we go into our triple extension. But most of our power is being driven from that lower body and more specifically the posterior chain. Now, I personally do not teach the swing snatch. I'm not a huge fan of the swing snatch. I feel like it has more of a focus on endurance as opposed to just raw power and explosiveness. So I'm gonna be teaching you guys the kettlebell snatch starting from the ground. I find this to be most effective in building explosive strength and power. Step number one, we have the single arm deadlift. So we're gonna be building this movement from the ground all the way up. So we're gonna start off, feet are gonna be about shoulder width, toes pointed straight ahead. I want the handle of the kettlebell cutting across the midfoot. So I do not want this bell all the way underneath your body. I do not want the bell out in front of your toes, right across the midfoot. We're then gonna push our butt back to hinge at the hips. We're then gonna lower down to grab our kettlebell on the inner part of the handle with a tight but loose grip. From there, we're gonna make sure we have tension in our hamstrings and in our glutes, and then we're gonna pull the lat down and back. So pull that lat down and back to create full body tension, keeping the spine neutral. So I don't want you guys looking up, cranking your neck like this. Spine is gonna be neutral, so pick a spot down and in front of the body to keep your eyes. From here, we're then gonna push, so I'll switch arms here. We're then gonna push into the ground. So we're driving our feet into the ground as we pull up off the ground, making sure that our chest and our hips rise up at the exact same time. So we're here, full body tension, all the way to full extension. So full hip extension, squeezing the glutes at the top, and then lower back down with control. So I want you guys drilling this single arm deadlift as many times as you need to until you've mastered the technique. Step number two, we have the single arm kettlebell clean. So now we really start getting explosive with this exercise and really start getting this weight moving quickly. So we've mastered that single arm deadlift technique. Now we're gonna really start going into triple extension. So we're extending at the ankles, knees, and hips, coming up onto the tippy toes to pull this weight up into that front rack position. So we need to be explosive off the floor. So you guys are really gonna start to see how important this lower body is in this exercise. So we're gonna come down hinging at the hips. We're gonna grab that kettlebell on the inner part of the handle. We're gonna pull the lat down and back. From here, we're exploding off the ground, going into that triple extension, smoothly rotating that bell around the wrist into that front rack position. So we really break this movement down. We're standing tall up on the tippy toes, and then we're shrugging and pulling this bell, keeping the bell nice and tight to the body, and then smoothly rotating the bell around the wrist into that front rack position. So we'll be explosive and powerful off the floor, smooth around the wrist. My golden rule here is with the kettlebell clean, also with the snatch as well, is we never want the bottom of this kettlebell pointing towards the ceiling. So always have this bell pointing down and towards the floor. We don't want this bell coming up and over, and that's where a lot of people have their issues, is they're grabbing the bell and they're just flipping it like this, pointing that bell towards the ceiling. Bell pointed down, be explosive off the floor, really jump that weight up with the lower body as you shrug and pull into that front rack position, knuckles pointed towards the ceiling, elbow nice and tight to the body. Before we move on to step number three, if you guys are still struggling with the single arm clean, listen, you are not alone. It's a very tough exercise and it takes time to master. Now, one thing you can do, or actually two things to help you with this exercise is number one, make sure you have a tight but loose grip on the bell. So if you're gripping this bell too tight, it's gonna be very difficult to have it smoothly rotate around the wrist. So make sure it's a tight but loose grip so that bell is allowed to travel around the wrist smoothly. If it's too tight, it's gonna probably flip up and over and you're gonna have a hard time smoothly rotating that bell. The second thing you can do is use the opposite free hand to assist with the clean. So all of our clean principles are going to apply. We're gonna jump this weight up. As that weight starts to come up, use this opposite hand to slide under the bell to help assist it into the front rack position until you really ingrain this movement pattern and really have this exercise mastered. Getting into step number 3, it's gonna have 3 separate parts. So part number 1, all we're gonna do is clean this kettlebell a little bit higher than the front rack position. So we'll call this the quarter press position. So all the same technique principles are going to apply for a single arm clean, but we're just gonna get that bell a little bit higher up. So we're starting to progress towards that snatch and progress towards bringing that bell all the way up overhead. So we grab our kettlebell, tight but loose grip on the inner part of the handle, full body tension. We're jumping this weight up, smoothly rotating that bell around the wrist into the quarter press position. Hold for a second, lower back down with control, reset. Really jumping that weight up with the lower body, keeping the kettlebell nice and tight to the body, trying to rotate that bell smooth as possible around the wrist. Part number 2, we're gonna clean to the half press position. So you guys are really gonna start to see now how much of a role the lower body plays in this exercise. So this triple extension, full hip extension coming up on the tippy toes is gonna start to get more and more important. So remember, full extension, then we pull into that half press position. So grabbing on the inner part of the kettlebell, jumping that bell up to the half press, smoothly rotating the bell around the wrist. Part number 3, we're gonna clean to that 3/4 press position. So now as we start to get above that half press position, you guys are gonna see it's gonna get a little bit harder to perfectly clean that kettlebell and perfectly rotate the bell around the wrist, again, above that half press position. So what we're gonna start to need to employ here is what's called a punch through, a term often used in kettlebell training. We just start to punch the arm through or punch the knuckles through at the top to reach full extension. Because the body, the lower body, the triple extension, and the shrug and pull is only gonna be able to take us so far. So once we get to that point of full extension, we've used all of our momentum, we're then gonna have to punch the arm through to some extent to fully lock out the arm overhead. So same technique principles are going to apply. Again, full triple extension, really pull, but we're going to start to slightly punch through at the top. Make sure it's as smooth as possible. Remember, we do not want that bell flipping up and over and slamming the forearms. So we grab that bell, smooth into that 3/4 press. So we're not going all the way up, but we're close. Being as smooth as possible, keeping that kettlebell tight to the body. Before we get into step number 4, before we start snatching, I need you guys to really make sure you've mastered each step and each progression before you start getting into the full snatch. It's so important to be working proper progression so we're building the proper strength and really mastering the technique so we can be as efficient and train as safely as possible. Step number 4, we have the kettlebell snatch. We're ready to go. We're ready to start snatching all the way up and overhead. Key things to remember here. Aggressive triple extension. We need to aggressively extend and jump this weight up as we shrug and pull. We want this to be one fluid motion. So we want to jump, shrug, and pull this weight up as high as we possibly can into that full extension. We don't want to catch the bell down here and then press out. This is not a shoulder exercise. So really focus on really jumping this weight up, keeping it tight to the body, slightly punching through at the top to get into that full extension. Making sure that we're not pointing that kettlebell up directly towards the ceiling and flipping it up and over. Try and smoothly rotate that bell around the wrist as best as you possibly can. So we grab our bell, we get set, load up the hamstrings and glutes, jump that weight up, smoothly punch through at the top to that full extension at the top, lower back down to the shoulder, and then lower back down to the ground. You guys should not be in a lot of pain doing kettlebell cleans and kettlebell snatches. If you're in a lot of pain, you need to go back and really dial in your technique and work on that technique. Some level of discomfort is okay, and that's gonna be part of the game and part of kettlebell training. You cannot completely remove that. But if you're in a ton of pain, you've gotta go back, work on these progressions, and really dial it in. If you guys got something out of this video, really took your technique to the next level, let me know, drop a comment below. Until the next workout, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys soon.